So, I am at the Boone County Historical Society. Boone County, Missouri is the county that includes the city of Columbia, which is where the University of Missouri is. We're down here to see the football game tonight, watch Grace and the marching band. And we had a little bit of time, so we came out here to see what this was all about. And they have this here. This is a cabin that was originally a slave home, slave cabin. There was a plantation not far from here that was bought by Stevens College. The land was bought by Stevens College in the 20s. It's one of the colleges here in Columbia. And this cabin was on the land. And it was originally the family that owned the plantation originally lived in this cabin when they first moved here. I think they said from Kentucky. But once they built their manor house, they had slaves living in this cabin. So this is a slave cabin. So it gives you an idea of how a slave family in Missouri would have lived. I don't think a slave family probably had a ramp. That's just a guess. Let's see what the sign says here. It just says Pop Collins. Pop Collins was an employee of Stevens College who restored this cabin, which is why it's called the Pop Collins cabin. Pop Collins was not a slave who lived in this cabin, but this is a slave cabin. It is relatively large for what I would think of when I think of slave cabins, and it clearly has an upstairs. And it was originally the first cabin that the white family lived in when they first moved to this area. So it was built for a white family and then repurposed later for slaves. But this is a genuine, they said, the sign said lightly restored slave cabin. So if you want to know, and there's no windows. The only windows appear to be on the front. And I don't know if it had these windows or it had more windows or less windows when it was a slave cabin. But it is kind of striking that the only windows on this cabin are on the front. I don't know if those were later additions or if when this was a slave cabin that they had more windows or less windows. Looks like they had a couple of doors to get into the top upstairs area. Probably a loft of some kind. You can schedule tours of this cabin, but you have to call ahead, which I did not do because we weren't really planning to come here. But it's got a chimney. It's got some kind of a fireplace. So yeah, authentic. Let's see if the sign says when it was built. It's built in 1818, between 1818 and 1820. And then they had 26 slaves. I wonder if all 26 of them lived in this house. But the cabin served as the family's temporary home while the manor was built, and later served as slave quarters. And it was sold to Stevens College in 1926. And this Pop Collins restored it. He was an employee of the college. And it's sitting here, and this is not where it originally sat. It was a few miles, I believe, that way. So that it was moved here. The slaves did not have this nice lake. So, anyway, slave cabin.